Have you ever wondered why, as the years go by, you find yourself stepping back from people you once cherished? Maybe you notice that gatherings you used to love now feel draining, or that you crave quiet more than conversation. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. In fact, what you're feeling is not only common, it's a sign of growth, not loss. Today, I invite you to join me on a journey through 6 profound reasons why we tend to distance ourselves from others as we age, and why that's not only normal, but often healthy. Some of these reasons might surprise you. Others might feel like I'm describing your own story. But by the end, I hope you'll see your choices in a new light, with more self-compassion and understanding. Stick with me to the end, because you might just realize that the space you've carved out for yourself is one of the wisest gifts you could ever give. Let's begin. Reason 1. The weight of old wounds. As the years accumulate, so do our experiences, not just the joyful ones, but the painful ones too. We collect memories, but we also gather scars. Some are tiny, a disagreement here, a forgotten birthday there. Others cut deeper, betrayals, disappointments, moments when trust was broken. With age, these old echoes become louder. We remember who was there for us during tough times and who wasn't. And slowly, almost without realizing, we become more selective. Not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Let me tell you about Margaret, a woman in her late 70s. She once filled her home with laughter, hosting Sunday dinners for friends and family. But over the years, some friends drifted away. One let her down when she needed support most. Another disappeared after her husband passed. There was no dramatic ending, just a slow trickle of small heartbreaks. Now, Margaret chooses solitude over forced company. She's not angry or resentful. She simply values her peace more than appearances. Through her experiences, she's built a quiet shield, a gentle armor that protects her heart and her energy. This isn't about closing yourself off. It's about being discerning. After a lifetime of giving, of opening up, of sometimes being hurt, you learn to pause before letting others in. You notice not just what people say, but how you feel after they leave. Psychologists call this relational fatigue, when maintaining connections feels more exhausting than rewarding. And if you're nodding along, know this: it's not a weakness. It's a sign you've lived deeply. You've seen the best and the worst in people. So when you choose space over closeness, it's not about shutting people out. It's about honoring your heart and recognizing that not everyone deserves access to it anymore. Reason 2. Craving depth over small talk. Remember when you were younger, sitting through endless conversations that never went anywhere? Gossip, chatter, words just to fill the silence? Maybe you tolerated it then, but now your patience for it has faded. With age, silence transforms. It's no longer awkward, it's restorative. You discover a serenity and quiet that you never knew before, and suddenly shallow talk feels like a waste of precious time. Consider Daniel, a retired teacher in his early 80s. He used to be the life of the party, always ready for a story or a joke. But these days, he skips large gatherings unless he feels truly up for it. When asked why, he simply says, "I'm done talking just to fill the air." Daniel isn't seeking isolation, he's seeking meaning. He wants conversations that matter, honest, unfiltered, real. If he can't find them, he'd rather spend the evening with a good book and a cup of tea than in a room full of noise that leaves him feeling lonelier than being alone. As we grow older, our emotional energy becomes more precious. The need to impress fades, the pressure to perform slips away. What emerges is a hunger for authenticity. We want to be around people who lift us up, not drain us. So if you find yourself stepping back from idle chatter, skipping crowded events, or choosing a quiet evening over a busy one, remember, you're not becoming distant. You're becoming intentional. You've earned the right to protect your peace. If you're still with me, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Share your city or country in the comments below. It's always inspiring to see how far these stories travel. Reason 3. Feeling misunderstood by a changing world. There comes a point when you look around and realize the world has changed, and so have you. The slang is unfamiliar. The values have shifted. Even the pace of conversation feels different. In the midst of all this change, you might start to feel invisible. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because people no longer take the time to understand where you're coming from. Let's talk about Evelyn, a former nurse in her late 70s. She used to love sharing stories with her grandchildren, tales of raising a family, working long shifts, and still finding time to volunteer. But now, when she speaks, her family listens politely, but quickly returns to their phones. It's not intentional, it's just a gap that's grown over time. This kind of disconnection isn't about being alone, it's about feeling unseen. You might be surrounded by people, yet feel like no one truly hears you. You share a memory, and the conversation moves on. You express a worry, and it's brushed aside. Over time, you start to offer less of yourself, not because you don't care, but because it's exhausting to not be heard. Psychologists call this emotional invalidation, when your feelings are quietly dismissed or minimized. But here's what matters. Your voice still has value. Your stories still matter. Just because others don't always listen doesn't mean you've lost your worth. Sometimes the answer isn't to force your way into their world, but to find spaces where you're truly seen and heard. And if those spaces are rare, it's natural to withdraw a bit, to guard your energy, to find peace in your own company. In that space, you are fully known by yourself. And that's something to cherish, not regret. Reason 4. The quiet fear of being a burden. As we grow older, a new worry can creep in, not just about our own health, but about becoming a weight on those we love. It's a fear that's hard to name, but impossible to ignore. You don't want to disrupt anyone's busy life. You don't want to ask for help, even when you need it. So, you go quiet. You stay in. You keep your distance. This isn't stubbornness. It's care. It's self-respect. You start saying no to invitations, not because you're uninterested, but because you don't want anyone to feel obligated. You hold back your concerns, not out of mistrust, but because you don't want to add to someone else's load. Let me introduce you to Bernard, an 85-year-old widower. He used to spend every weekend with his daughter's family. But as his mobility declined, he started saying no more often. When asked why, he'd say, "I don't want them rearranging their lives for me. They have enough on their plates." His family never made him feel unwelcome, but the fear of being a burden outweighed his longing for connection. This is a tension many older adults feel. The more you depend on others, the less you want to. The more you value connection, the more reluctant you become to reach out because you've spent a lifetime being strong, being the helper. Now, asking for support feels unfamiliar, maybe even uncomfortable, but here's the truth. Those who love you want to be there for you. They might not always show it perfectly, but your value isn't tied to how self-reliant you are. It's tied to who you are. Still, the fear lingers. You hold back when you want to speak. You stay home when you want to visit. Over time, it feels easier to stay away than to risk feeling like a responsibility. If you're finding these reflections helpful, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that matter. Reason 5. The gentle fading of old relationships. Not all relationships end with a bang. Some just quietly fade away. people drift in different directions. Priorities change. Life slowly pulls you apart, almost without you noticing. One day you realize the people who once filled your days are no longer part of your routine. It's not always sad. Sometimes it brings relief. Other times it leaves a subtle ache, like you've moved on from something precious. Think of Linda, a 74-year-old who used to walk every week with her closest friend from childhood. Over the years, those walks became monthly, then yearly, and eventually stopped altogether. There was no falling out, just a gentle understanding that their paths had diverged. Linda reflects. Friendships often form around shared seasons, raising kids, working together, living nearby, but as those seasons change, so do our connections. As you move further into later life, you might find yourself surrounded by people who no longer match who you're becoming. And that's not a failure, it's a kind of progress. When you value your time and energy more, you naturally become more intentional about who you share it with. Sometimes, what you need most is space. Space to breathe, to reflect, to simply be. Old companions who once lifted you up might now leave you feeling tired. Conversations that once flowed easily might now feel forced. Instead of clinging to what was, you choose distance, not out of anger, but out of respect for yourself. Growing older is often described as losing people. But sometimes letting go is your decision. Because you've realized that closeness without true connection can feel lonelier than being alone. Reason 6. Discovering the joy of your own company. At a certain point, you stop chasing company and start cherishing solitude. Not out of hurt or emptiness, but because you've found something rare. Your own presence is enough. There's a special kind of peace that comes when you realize you don't have to explain yourself, impress anyone, or pretend to be someone you're not. For years, you may have been surrounded by people. Through work, family, commitments. Maybe you barely had a moment to pause, to listen to your own thoughts. But now, that quiet is sacred. Not something to escape, but something to protect. Let's talk about George, an 83-year-old who was once the center of every gathering. His home was always open, his laughter the loudest. But these days he finds more joy watching the sunrise from his porch than hosting parties. When asked if he feels lonely, he smiles and says, "I have enough memories to keep me company for a lifetime." What George has found isn't loneliness, it's peace. This shift can puzzle those around you. They might worry, thinking you're withdrawing out of sadness. But in truth, you're tuning into something deeper, a rhythm that's softer but richer. You no longer feel the need to fill every silence, to justify every choice, or to be constantly available. That's not detachment, it's insight. It's the kind of understanding that comes only after years of giving, stretching, and showing up for others. Solitude, when chosen, becomes a refuge. It's where you recharge, where your thoughts grow, where your truest self can breathe freely. The older you become, the more you realize that some of your most peaceful days don't include anyone else at all. You move at your own pace, follow your own interests, and for the first time in a long while, you feel whole, not because the world has changed, but because you've claimed your place in it. If you're still here, let me know by commenting 6 below. And if you haven't yet, subscribing is the best way to support our community and ensure you never miss a story that speaks to you. So, which of these reasons resonated with you today? Was it the gentle fading of old friendships, or the moment you realized you no longer need to justify your desire for peace? Maybe it was the understanding that stepping back isn't about loss, but about growth. Whatever it was, I hope this story reminded you of something important. You're not falling apart, you're transforming. Pulling back from others doesn't mean you're unfriendly or resentful. It might simply mean you've grown wiser. You've earned the right to be intentional, to protect your calm, to honor your own rhythm, and to seek meaning not in the crowd, but in the quiet certainty within. There's dignity in solitude. There's power in knowing your boundaries. And there's true freedom in no longer needing to prove your worth through constant activity or endless connection. If you find yourself stepping away from people, pause and ask yourself why. You might discover that what you're really seeking isn't distance, but alignment with your truest self. Let this video be a reminder. Even in your quiet, you are seen. Even in your silence, you are understood. And even in your solitude, you are not truly alone because many others are walking this same path with quiet strength and deep reflection. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share in the comments one insight you're taking with you today and how you'll carry it forward. Your voice matters here, so don't hesitate to speak up. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need these words. Your support allows us to keep creating content that uplifts and empowers. Until next time, remember, every season of life has its own wisdom, and sometimes the most beautiful growth happens in the quietest spaces.